Hello and welcome to the Disruptive Innovation Festival, a 3-week-long online open access event that brings people together to explore the question, the economy is changing, what do I need to know, experience and do? We're on the penultimate day of the DIF, and in fact the last session of the penultimate day of the DIF, and my name is Seb. I'm a member of the Open Mic Facilitation team here at the Disruptive Innovation Festival, and over the next hour, maybe a little bit longer, I'm going to be joined by a team of people talking about urban agriculture and the future of cities. So the best way for you guys to interact, and we really want to encourage you guys to send in your comments and your questions as much as possible, is mainly through two ways. One is to click on the bottom left-hand corner of the YouTube video that you're watching right now, where you see join the conversation, and there you'll be taken to a screen where you can submit your questions, and Henry will be feeding on those. And the other way is to go and directly post comments and questions into the space right below the Hangout embed where there's comments, and we'll also be feeding those into the panel we have today. Anyway, without any further ado, I'll hand over to Henry now to set the scene and to get us rolling this evening, or this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you're dialing in from.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining. My name is Henry Gordon-Smith. I'm a founder of Agritecture.com. Is the video coming through? Yeah? So thanks so much for joining tonight. It was a great honor to be invited to speak with DIF. And today we're talking about the future of cities, and in particular how food and agriculture will exist in them. So we've been getting a lot of news lately on vertical farming and urban agriculture from around the world, and it's been really exciting to have this set of panelists here today. We have a range, which you can see about in the bio on the site. We have Max Losel joining us from a company called Agrilution. We have Andrew Carter from a company called Smallhold, based in Brooklyn, and Florenzia Costa, who's a talented architect interested in vertical farming. So they'll do more details intros a little bit later. But first, I want to talk a little bit about disruption and this title, The Rise of Agritecture. Now, the reason we've kind of chosen this is because we believe in the power of ideas, or at least I do. I believe in the power of ideas, and that's why 4.5 years ago I decided, when there was a gap in the knowledge around vertical farming and urban agriculture, to start a blog, agritecture.com, to share news and insights in the industry, as well as conceptual designs that are quite futuristic in nature, to inspire people like you to get involved and to disrupt. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the power of those ideas and actually explore and engage in a little bit of a visionary process here today. So some interesting news that we've heard recently is a company called Farmed Here announced that they're going to expand from their vertical farming operations to 18 others in the world. So that's a bit on the commercial side. I think we'll hear a little bit about that. And in fact, the research side and exploring those commercial questions is happening even in depth here today. So me, Andrew, and Max, we're in Bremen, Germany right now with the German Space Agency conducting a 3-day research study in collaboration with the Association for Vertical Farming to design a commercially viable vertical farm for today. So we'll answer some questions about vertical farming and get into that. But first, I would like to ask Max Losel to introduce himself and talk about how he's getting involved in disrupting food. Just wait for him to unmute.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Max. I'm from Munich, Germany, and as Henry just mentioned, we're all sitting here together in Bremen at the moment. We had our annual meeting here with the Association for Vertical Farming, which Henry and I now officially chair as vice chairs for the coming 2 years. I'm the co-founder of the Association for Vertical Farming, which is an international nonprofit network that connects people in the industry of vertical farming. We're a network for universities, businesses, experts, as well as vertical farming enthusiasts. On top of that, I co-founded a company called Agrilution, which is based in Munich, Germany. And Agrilution builds, or is currently developing a home farming ecosystem, basically a dishwasher-sized unit that's fully automated and works together with an app and a refill supply system to let you grow your own food at home. I was first introduced to the topic of vertical farming through a book called The Vertical Farm, which was authored by Dixon de Pommier, who is a professor from Columbia University in New York. And he brought out that book, I think it was in 2010, and I heard about it a short time before it came out. Purchased a copy, and I was reading it while I was traveling the world. I was in New Zealand at the time when I first read it, and I was so fascinated by the whole concept of vertical farming and how it was laid out in that book that I reached out to Dixon, and I was just absolutely fascinated. So I wanted to know, and I got in touch with him and exchanged some emails, and I wanted to know where in the world I could study something related to vertical farming. And that's the reason I then moved to the Netherlands, and I studied international food and agribusiness there with a focus on indoor farming. And yeah, because university wasn't really enough and just researching theoretical things wasn't my thing, I dove into the topic a bit deeper, and that's how the association got started, as well as my company, Agrilution. So yeah, thank you all for listening in.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that intro, Max. And I'm just going to try and pull up here. So as you can see our participants. I guess when I talk, you can see the slides I have going on. So you can see our participants and some social media links to follow them and to engage with them. So I'm going to just go to the next slide and just show, we've got an image here of some Google searches of agritecture so that our audience gets some idea of the multitude of ways. So if you just can kind of Google that, you can get some idea of the various ways you can integrate food into buildings. And this next slide, we've got the Plant Cube, which is the product that Max was talking about here. So next coming up, we're going to dive in and talk to Florenzia Costa at Clepsydra.
Hello, everybody. I'm Florenzia. I'm right now in Milan, and well, Clepsydra was actually designed in Milan in 2008, and actually I think it was about the same time as Professor de Pommier was developing with his students in Columbia the possibilities about introducing agriculture in cities. Although I met Professor de Pommier in 2011 when we entered the challenge Buckminster Fuller Foundation competition, because we had already developed Clepsydra from technological point of view quite a lot, and we had also introduced some integration between Clepsydra and the housing situation in Milan. And I think, well, the case of Clepsydra is particular because from the beginning we thought it as a piece that it's archetypical of what now you would call building integration, building integrated architecture. You know, this is quite a building attached to existing or new buildings. And this is the way we thought it from the beginning. And this is the way that I still think agriculture needs to function from an urban point of view. We presented it in China on the World Expo 2010, and already we developed with Tongji University there some possibilities of introducing Clepsydra on their new campus on Pudong Island. So we went, since then we had developed a lot of experience on how a kind of building as Clepsydra would interact with the existing buildings in cities. This is still my we have seen the field grow a lot since then, in 7 years, and a lot of components that are needed to well develop this discipline had been developed and manufactured 7 years ago. We didn't know how to solve many of the problems that we were facing, but I still believe that projects which integrate architecture in the city, not just as components, but we need to think how agriculture has to become real buildings in the city, not just parts. So it's a very complex thing, and I think it needs to go that way.
Great, thank you, Florenzia. And hopefully now we've got the clepsydra unit popping up on the screen there, so you can see this is a vertical farming unit designed by Florenzia Costa and her colleagues, and it would attach to an existing structure. Isn't that right, Florenzia? And could provide fresh food on site to that structure.
Mm-hmm. And the connector piece, of course, is a prototype that it's meant to be adapted to to different locations and different conditions of buildings. So there are 3 parts. I mean, the farming itself, the greenhouse, and then the connector, the bridge, which is the piece that gets the clepsydra adapted to different situations.
Okay, great, thank you. So let's move on to Andrew Carter, founder of Smallhold. We've got some pictures here coming up of, it looks like the Manhattan Bridge, Williamsburg Bridge there.
Williamsburg Bridge. So, hey guys, my name is Andrew. I guess I can go into my background. I graduated in 2007 from the University of Vermont. Really interesting program. Environmental sciences with ecological design. We studied a lot of these systems by John Todd. They're called living machines. It's water filtration using
Yeah, it sounds like we lost Andrew there for for a moment.
Do a quick sound test first, please, Andrew.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you again.
It's weird, we're all in the same room. I don't know what's going on.
So we do seem to be having some slight technical difficulties with Andrew's mic, which, as he said just now, is a bit puzzling considering he's sitting there. It seems to be your positioning, Andrew, that when you pull closer in, for whatever reason, the microphone's not picking you up. So we're hearing you quite well now.
Well, I think I'm going to go as Henry right now.
Yeah, don't move.
That's okay. Anyway, so here, how do I close this thing? Sorry about that. So after I moved to New York, I started getting into a bunch of different urban agriculture projects, such as the Water Pod, Window Farms, Bright Farms, and I work actually with Henry now. We do urban agriculture consulting, so that's my day job. But on the side, I run a company called Smallhold. What I'm really interested in with this company is the concept of allowing small-scale farmers to actually compete in the local market. What's happening right now, what we're seeing in the urban agriculture world, at least in New York, is that you either have these large-scale companies coming in, they might have relatively small facilities, but they have tons of investment, and then you have these other people that are really interested in the local food movement, but they have some difficulty getting in. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, especially regarding vertical farming and different creative ways of agriculture. And what I'm really interested in is helping these people that are really interested in these entrepreneurs compete. And so I have a system that I installed in Williamsburg. This one's related to mushrooms. I'm interested in any other sort of facility. It could be microgreens, it could be lettuce, and the concept is remotely monitoring basically everything. And you see we have some interesting people behind us, actually. But it's remotely monitoring everything. So you have agriculture specialists that are monitoring and sending goods to the farmer for a fee that is competitive for them to be selling. So the point is that they can come in and be and grow a decent amount of produce and not have to work 40 hours a week doing this. With enough support from the agriculture specialists, they can work maybe 2 or 3 days a week. So you can have a day job, but then on your extra time you can grow a decent amount of food that's enough to just be a supplemental income. And I guess you could show a picture of my shipping container. I don't know if I can do this.
Screen share. And then just talk.
Hey. Okay, so I mean how this one works with the mushrooms is that I have it's solely a fruiting chamber in that shipping container, and so with remote monitoring, it's actually minimal management of this fruiting chamber. Most of the work that I found occurs earlier on when you're doing pasteurization, you're doing spawn creation, and you're doing, I don't know, management of everything else. So the point is that you have professionals managing that, and then you have the smallhold farmers managing everything else. And so it's basically the labor end of things and the selling ends of things. And so that's.
Okay, I'm going to test this one. Can you hear me or not?
Yeah.
Yeah? Make sure I've got the audio.
I can't hear you.
No?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Hello?
Yeah, now it works.
Interesting. Okay. Am I coming up on the screen? No. Disruption isn't that easy, it seems, with the technical challenges. Am I coming through now?
Yeah.
Okay, let's stop the screen sharing. Okay, I really want to thank our participants for introducing themselves through those technical challenges. It's tough, but really it's such an exciting group doing amazing things in different ways and really approaching unique challenges, right? So Max over here is of course engaged in the commercial vertical farming setting through Association Vertical Farming, but on a small level you're looking at how consumers at home can really engage with these products and this technology in a beautiful way. We've got Andrew's really approaching it from a kind of hands-off, smaller commercial level, but really making it so you can engage in the business. And Florenzia, is, among other things, has recognized that there's a way that we can actually integrate vertical farms without necessarily building these entirely new structures, but attaching to the existing infrastructure we have in cities. Okay, so before we move into talking a little bit about cities 2025 and after, and the disruptions that will involve food, let's talk a little bit about some of the problems that cities might face in 2025. Okay, so we know we have another 3 billion coming and that we would need to feed those people. Okay, and so we need to increase supply. That's one issue. What other issues are we going to face 2025 that might affect food, our relationship with food and cities? Because it's the water, okay?
Yeah, I mean water. I mean it's an issue in lots of. Can you guys hear me right now, or is that?
Yeah, if you sit next to him.
Yeah, that could work.
All right, we'll do this together. Yeah, water's. You know, I'm representing Los Angeles on this call, but I actually think it's going to be everyone's problem, no matter where you live. Maybe not in the next 10 years, but definitely in the next 50 years. You know, I mean I think that's generally accepted in a lot of the environmental world. Is that we have no idea where we're going as far as fresh water is concerned.
Yeah, so it's 70% of our fresh water lease is being used for agriculture, so that's enormous, and that fresh water is certainly depleting. So we need to be able to grow more food using less water. That's one thing we know. Max, any comments on the challenges we might face 2025 and beyond?
I think the entire food, energy, water nexus is a huge challenge, especially for cities, because I mean you mentioned that we're going to probably have another 3 billion people by the year 2050, but I think even more important is that these people will be moving to cities and will be living in cities. So you have mega cities that are forming, especially in the Asian regions. I mean, New York, where you guys are from, is a good example, of course. But I was in Beijing twice this year, and what's forming there is basically a cluster of 3 cities that's going to fuse into one because so many people are moving there. So it's going to be a cluster that's going to inhabit over 100 million people. Basically providing that many people with food is something that you need to plan for today, especially with fresh and perishable foods. I mean, we're not talking about grains like wheat or maize or rice here, but fresh, perishable stuff. And we need to find new ways of farming those locally. And in my opinion, vertical farming is a huge opportunity to solve a part of that challenge.
So for our audience that's kind of fresh here, Max, let's do a basic definition of vertical farming.
Yeah, sure. So vertical farming is basically multi-layer cultivation of crops. And preferably you do that in a closed environment, so you can control all parameters like the temperature, the water cycles, the humidity, the lighting. Lighting is usually provided by LEDs because those are, at the moment, the most efficient way of providing light. And it has numerous advantages. I mean, compared to traditional agriculture, conventional agriculture, you save up to 98% of the water consumption, 60% of fertilizers. You can produce food locally year-round, no matter where you are in the world. And you can predict yields. I mean, you can sell at a stable price throughout the year. You can make deals with your consumers or wholesale or supermarkets, wherever you're supplying with your produce. Yeah, I mean, it has enormous benefits in so many different areas. And I think one of the biggest ones is that any place in the world, any city in the world can produce a large portion of its food locally without having to import.
Great, thank you for that coverage. So, Florenzia, we covered some of the main ones in regards to challenge that cities face, but
you know, I think I would add to what Max was saying and to what Andrew were mentioning. I think the third subject here is power, energy, you know, the recycling of energy. I think it's a big issue here. We are talking about vertical farming and growing plants in different stories and growing. I think we have to consider using also waste spaces in cities. We are now very used to see like top of the buildings greenhouses on top of the buildings, but we would have to consider also using all kinds of wasted space in cities, not only urban, small lots, but also underground space. And so energy and electrical power in big cities, I would say, for instance, Buenos Aires is a big issue in this, has big big energy problems, and it's, you know, it's 8 million people, 10 million people, and I think, you know, the recycling of energy and the production of energy and finding, using ways of, well, lead now technology is helping a lot in the development of our discipline, and I think it is a way. We have to go into studying ways also of considering underground space. And you know, we're not so much seeing projects that consider underground space, but I think it's we have to also think about recycling energy and, you know, using all kinds of underground space in cities to grow food.
Sure. So now I'm going to shift a little bit into the kind of next section of our conversation, which is, you know, about disruptions. We've identified some of the problems, and now we need to think about how we can, you know, solve those problems with kind of innovative ideas. And I love the exercises of kind of visioning the future of cities. I find that it's been very satisfying, both in the optimism that it generates for a world that's often very difficult to be optimistic in, and also it helps kind of frame the way you see your own city and your place in it. So we're hoping that some of our ideas might inspire you somewhat to be bold and to think about that, and, you know, you shoot for the stars and land on the moon. I think that's what they say, something like that. So anyway, it kind of goes back to what Florenzo was talking about, maximizing unused spaces and not just thinking the typical lot. My city is New York City, which is an exciting one. And so let's think about New York City 2025 and beyond. One element that I think will develop is, as we, as an industry, a young industry, begin to learn how to optimize the plant recipes, or the recipes, meaning the inputs needed to cultivate plants indoors, the costs of doing that will be reduced. And so the capacity to integrate it with spaces, small spaces like restaurants, or larger spaces like greenhouses and facades, or even the spaces that Florenzo was talking about, such as basements. It's my understanding it's my belief that those costs will go down. And simultaneously, we're seeing a rise in other green technologies like PVs, green roofs, some other kind of insulation technologies, and buildings are being reframed not just as consumers, but as producers. They represent a physical space in the city. They represent an asset. They consume a lot as a result of that, right? So they take up energy to be constructed, and throughout their life they consume energy. The inhabitants within it consume water. The heating requires lots of energy as well. And those people inside of it, and people spend 90% of their time indoors in buildings. They eat food. And I think that as those costs go down, we will begin to see food and food production, agriculture, as one of the technologies that's part of contributing to the building that gives. So I think that will mean that in a place like New York City, where the real estate costs are very high, I think that you'll see some innovative projects that are more than just showcases. Maybe in 2025 they'll still be showcases, but let's say shifting in to 2030, 2035, they'll be actually embedded into a lot of the new builds. There's also a large housing crisis in New York City. There's a lack of affordable housing. So I think that, you know, a lot of the populations that are struggling with affordable housing have kind of a lack of access to fresh food as well. And that's also a public health problem. So I think that the integration of this food will also be combined with an understanding that agriculture in the city will contribute to the reduction of our public health costs in New York City and other cities in the States. And so I think that will be another driver to kind of reduce those costs and encourage it being embedded into cities. I also think that on the peri-urban, the edges of the cities, we're going to see this continued trend of warehouse vertical farms. I think a lot of people talk about that with their cities, so I'll let them get into the details of what those are. But my primary vision is that it's going to be much easier to integrate for architects, for engineers, for real estate developers to integrate agriculture into the building planning. And that's kind of the vision of agritecture, is that we can embed it. We can merge our vision of cities and buildings with our vision of agriculture. So that's really mine. We got one question here. Oh yeah, 3? Oh, in it. Do you see 3 questions in there? Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to Max Loso on the city of Munich, and I'll try and prepare for this question with our team.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I think, or I don't think, I'm in the midst of making vertical farming a main topic for the city of Munich, and we really want to create Munich as one of the vertical farming hubs of Europe. And I think that by the year 2025, vertical farming is going to be mainstream globally. We're going to see vertical farms all over the world. We've only been engaged with ABF for roughly 2 years now, but we've managed to gather over 177 members globally, including most of the big multinational companies active in the field. And I think that proved that there's a huge trend at the moment going on. A lot of money is flowing into this industry, and it's just a matter of time of it spreading throughout the globe. So I think that there are multiple ways of introducing vertical farming or urban farming technologies into the cities of the future, and one of those will be home farming, of course, and that's something that I'm very active in. I think a lot of people will be able to produce some part of their daily demand for leafy greens and vegetables and herbs by producing them in-house. So that's the way. Then I think community-based agriculture will play a role. Maybe not only the way we're seeing it now as this very hands-on experience, but I think we'll have vertical farms in apartment buildings where a number of people have access to one farming module and take care of it as a collective, and then they share what's being produced there. Then another thing is that I think that food systems are way more decentralized than they are at the moment. At the moment, there's a couple of big players in the world that basically dictate what we eat, or dictate what the majority of the people in developed countries eat. And I think that's going to change dramatically over the course of the next 10 to 20 years by means such as vertical farming, urban farming. Another trend that's going on that's really fascinating, what I'm not really in that scene yet, but I think 3D printing food will play a major role, maybe a bit further down the line. It's not at a stage where vertical farming is yet, but I think in the future we'll see a lot of improvements on that end, especially as the entire 3D printing world is really as it's an exponential technology, and it'll definitely make that shift even further to the food producing end of it. I think food, the way we have it now, that we go to supermarkets, that's going to drastically change as well. I don't think that, maybe not, and by the year 2025 we'll probably still have normal supermarkets, but I think that's going to change over the next 50 to maybe 100 years, is that supermarkets will be obsolete. People will have abundant access to fresh food no matter where you are in the world. And I think I'm going to shut up now to leave something for Andrew to say.
No, yeah, but while you're talking about that, Max, and that was great, talk about a supermarket in Munich and
a supermarket
a little bit on that change.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, let's take Berlin as a case. One of the vertical farming startups just opened the first vertical farming, in-store vertical farm, where fresh food is produced in the store and you can harvest it directly there. So it's not being transported there, and it doesn't lose any nutrients, any taste, any quality, because it doesn't get any, well, it does get fresher. You can always harvest it in your own home. But harvesting it in the supermarket is really something that's going to change the way food is produced in the future and how fresh food is produced. And something that I still want to say is that I think also a huge opportunity for companies is creating food for their own cafeterias. So I think that's something that we're going to see in the future as well, is that a lot of these big multinationals in Munich, some of them are already thinking, some of them we're in negotiations with, will be producing a part of their food for their cafeterias on site instead of having to buy them from an external party and transporting them.
Okay, great. Thank you, Max. I totally agree about food being, grown in both actually providing food for the market, but actually even trying to inform the visitor at the market of what clean and local can really be like.
Basically reconnecting people with what they eat.
Sure. So we're going to field a couple questions here before we move on a bit, just for good times, because we got some good ones. So Rachel Mann is asking a question about land-based agriculture supplies. So land-based agriculture is not just feeding us, it's also feeding the animals that we eat. So could we grow things like feedstocks or bio-based energy in these kinds of integrated or these kind of vertical farming systems we're talking about? I think the answer is most certainly yes. There are systems out there that grow fodder for feeding cows and also horses. Fodder is typically not something that's extremely difficult to grow in an indoor vertical farm, so you can grow them quite rapidly. So it's actually extremely feasible for farmers to start investing in their own kind of capsules to provide that fodder. And in some cases, this has even wider applications than North America, for example. So the Association of Vertical Farming was recently in India, in Bangalore, India, and that was a big topic of discussion. There are regions in India that are experiencing large droughts, and a lot of that is in result to the fodder that's being grown for meat consumption. And also a lot of the farms are quite small, and so they only have a number of cows, and so they need to have some kind of independent source of that fodder, as opposed to buying the product at a smaller amount, which is often, as we know, more expensive. So yes, Rachel, certainly a big opportunity there. Andrew?
I think one of the reasons why you don't see that much right now is because it's a little cost prohibitive. A lot of these people, at least in the States, there's a lot of research going into this, but it's still considerably cheaper to buy this in bulk from wherever. And so it's unfortunate because there's a lot of research that's going into it, but something needs to drive that. And so you see it in a drought-stricken country where they can't buy it, and so they're going to start growing it. But stateside,
what do you think that is? Is because the cost of water isn't applied to really those crops yet? I mean, as David Suzuki said, these externalities that economists refer to, right? That's one of them. It's something we assume is free, and it simply isn't. There is a cost to it, and we're not charging that cost. And I think it's a matter of time before we will.
I think it'll definitely happen. I mean, we see it in California right now. All this water issues, and then I think these progressive water-saving technologies will make a lot more sense. Especially in 2025.
Okay, so we got another question. This one is about growing food at home. So there was an MIT study saying that, I guess, Americans, maybe 40% of food can be provided by homegrown food. And there's a question about grow packs for growing food in your own home. So, Florenza, feel free to jump in as well. Max is engaged in this with his product, and don't worry, we'll still get to the other exciting cities out here. let's talk about this. What's the realistic future for growing food at home? Is it possible? How possible is it now? And what might change in 2025 or beyond?
It's possible. It's doable now with technologies we have. It doesn't have to be a high-tech way of growing your own food. I mean, a lot of people use their backyard or they're someplace inside their house to grow at least a small portion. I would say 40% is a bit drastic, a bit too high. Maybe if you have a lot of space outside, that's doable, but if you just grow everything indoors, that would take a lot of your time if you want to produce 40% of your own food. If you're a vegetarian only, maybe that's doable. But if you consider protein and you don't like insects, then I think it's going to be difficult. Permaculture, yeah. Yeah, considering there are other means like growing mushrooms. I mean, Andrew is an expert on that, and I think using maybe coffee waste to grow your own mushrooms at home. You can grow your own veggies. You can grow insects and grind them and use them for baking something protein rich. I think there are a lot of ways to feed yourself, even if you don't have a garden, if you don't have access to a balcony or a garden, or if you live in a region where it's just not optimal to grow your own food because you're limited by climate or season.
Yeah, I mean, diet. You brought up bugs, and bugs could potentially be a really high source of protein, but the Western diet doesn't support that right now. We know some people in New York that have a protein bar that's made out of cricket flour. So as you mention that to people freak out about it, even though it's when you look at the bar, you would never even know that there's crickets in it.
Yeah, it doesn't even taste. It tastes good. It tastes like a protein bar. It's like why would you get some other protein? But yeah, I mean, what excites me about the at-home, situation is kind of the DIY element. So that couple in California, and California, there's lots of swimming pools, and they decided, they couldn't really pay for their swimming pool maintenance anymore. It's a challenging time, and all that water is wasteful. I mean, I think they probably had some restrictions on it too. So what did they do? They converted that typology that was kind of embedded into their home and to many homes, and they converted it into a farm. They put a greenhouse on top of it, put some aquaponics down at the bottom, and started teaching themselves farming. And I think if every Californian started converting their swimming pool into a farm, that would be amazing. I mean, you could grow a lot of food there, and it would really shift the way we eat food. So I like that because it's not necessarily high tech. It's somewhere in between, and I think there's a place for kind of many different approaches here. But I like the idea of the kind of maker element getting into it, right? We can't just. Some of us will just want to learn about eating good food, but some of us will actually want to learn how to grow it.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about us is what we're focused on. High production, relatively high production per square foot. I don't know necessarily what this person was asking, but it's also possible they were asking about these small, tiny production things. Like you have a little oyster mushroom bags that you can get at Whole Foods, and I think those things are amazing. I don't know if they're necessarily worth it price-wise. You could probably buy those oyster mushrooms, at the same price, if not less. If you just bought it, but I think getting people into the field, getting people understanding where their food comes from. A lot of people don't even understand the process of oyster mushrooms, like what's going on there, what they're doing, breaking down material and turning into this thing that they love. Just having that, I think, is pretty amazing. I think it's cool, but I don't know if it's necessarily going to feed the world.
Great, thanks. So let's move on to Florenzia here. Florenzia, coming through?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, recently in Milan there was this, the food fair or the expo, and food was part of that. And so you can answer, of course, on the at-home market and some of the things we said. I think it's a bit tough because we're in the same room here. We want you to join in and then talk about, the future of food in the city of Milan. Yeah.
I think in general, what I believe is that growing food in cities will become part in terms of the development of cities, will become a standard of a design standard, like like you consider when you design dwellings, you consider a certain portion of square footage for parking. I think you will start to consider to have buildings that have farms inside, that provide farms for inhabitants of the building, and it will become a design standard. I think as we now consider parking space or other facilities in buildings. And this, I think, will make the big shift in terms of you don't need to grow it, to have the grow pack at home in your own apartment, but yes, in the community. I mean, considering buildings, entire buildings, like any other communal space in buildings. So I think we are cities are, in terms of permitting, this growing in cities becomes a big issue in terms of regulations and permitting process, and considering it as completely new structures. So I think this is going to become a standard, a design standard. Well, and regarding the Milan Expo, and I think it didn't have, it wasn't taking, as a complete 100% issue, the agritexture. I think it was approached. I mean, the agriculture and food considerations were taken broadly, but not exactly. We could have done more. This is what I think. It could have been done much more in this field. It wasn't really something that was taken in a large extent, I think. But it helped grow the knowledge in people. I mean, this is what I think in terms of food concerns. Yes, in this sense, I think it collaborated a lot, but not so much in urban agriculture.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Florenzia, and I think we interviewed, or I interviewed for Agritecture, James Bieber, the architect of the U.S. Pavilion, and I asked him why he selected the product he did for the facade there, which is considered probably the largest exposed facade vertical farm. And the reason was, he's like, oh, they had kind of all the technical specs I needed. I'm an architect, and I need to kind of have, like with a green roof, I need to have that knowledge just very accessible before I kind of take on that risk for the client. And I respect that answer, and I think that there's space for us as an industry to improve, to make the people involved with really the construction, development, and design of buildings, make that integration easier for them. Speak that language as well as we have to do with the planning. And that's, 10 years from now, 2025, that's a possibility, right? There could be collaboration through the Association for Vertical Farming, other groups, individual groups.
Well, I mean, Dixon Depommier is working a lot. We know he's working with the city of New York a lot. I mean, to change and instruct and make the people knowledgeable about possibilities, and say, well, nothing like that is made in other, in Italy, at least in cities. I mean, we're not developing that kind of agritecture culture. This is what I think it should be done this way, to change the concept of how you design in cities, from the start.
Exactly. So I want to talk a little bit about that in the context of Milan. So Milan, like other European cities, have a strong and much older history than even New York. And so there's some historical elements that restrict kind of the changes to the building, and agriculture can interrupt a lot of that. And Paris is another great example of that. So what do you envision as the leap over that, or the leap around that, in the context of Milan and possibly other historic cities in Europe?
Well, I think that Europe is well ready. Europeans are very ready culturally to accept that you can bring your vegetable garden closer to the center of towns, because it's actually a part of the culture, you know. I mean, in every city around Europe, you don't need to go a lot far from the center to find people who, in their own residences, they have their vegetable gardens. And this was also a knowledge of urban design in the early 20th century. I mean, the best German housing projects in the 1920s, well, considering, you know, having the vegetable gardens attached to the new neighborhoods, new housing projects. So I think that Europeans were ready to accept something like that. It needs architects and developers, especially developers, because, you know, we architects, in 2008 we had come very, very close to building Milan, actually a community, a pair of buildings very close to the center of town that had 2 clepsydras attached to them. And people were responding spectacularly. I mean, this was formed through a co-op, like in New York. You know, people would buy their apartments with a percentage of surface of a clepsydra attached to it, and you know, people were eager to have an apartment that kind. But it all depended, you know, the thing didn't go through because of Milan is a very complex city in terms of how empty land in Milan is developed and managed and privately. So there was a kind of a developer's problem, but not so much, not at all a consumer's problem. People were loving to buy an apartment for an extra amount of square footage to have their farm, to have a percentage of clepsydra belonging to them. So I know for sure customers are ready for that. We need to integrate the private sector in terms of developers, you know. So.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, certainly those developers are going to be key in overcoming how we really change the tapestry of urban planning to include agriculture. Exciting news about potential cooperative vertical farm in Milan. Can you imagine? That would be a life right there.
It was 2008, much before anybody was talking about vertical farming.
Yeah. So just audiences we know, and Seb, we might need you to maybe explain how this works again, but you're welcome to ask some questions to us. We're going to be wrapping up soon as we move on to the next speaker, Andrew Carter. But Seb,
just a quick recap on how you can get involved in this session and get your questions, and some of you have already done so. Use the Q&A feature of Google Hangouts, which you'll find is a little tab in the bottom left-hand corner of your YouTube embed, which will say something like "join the conversation" or something fun like that. Or just post them in the comment space, and I'll be collecting those from there. And that comment space is literally just below the video you're watching right now. So do send in your questions, because I know the guys really want some challenging ones.
Okay, so now we're going to go from Europe all the way back to the United States, but this time the West Coast. We've got Andrew Carter, a LA native, right?
Yeah, I grew up there. I moved to New York a little while ago, but I constantly miss it. I feel like everyone I know is moving out there, actually. LA is such a hard one to deal with. As an environmentalist, and a lot of my friends that are also environmentalists, you know, a lot of people think that LA probably just shouldn't really be in the state that it is right now. There's too many people there, and there is not enough water. I think that it's generally accepted that desalination is going to become a really big thing in California. Unfortunately, agriculture is definitely the biggest consumer, but that's statewide. That's not necessarily a Los Angeles problem. I mean, in a way, it is not a problem because it's everyone's problem in California. I think that LA is a really interesting one, because I think that with this water issue, I'm just sort of brainstorming about it. I think that more large-scale, centralized agriculture would probably use water the most efficiently. Small-scale stuff, it's really interesting, and you can do some really creative stuff. But as far as hydroponics and vertical farming and all that stuff is concerned, I don't think that they could use water as efficiently as a large-scale facility, whether it's in a greenhouse or it's enclosed in a warehouse or a large building. I think that that is probably how it's going to be, either inside the city or most likely close outside of the city. I also unfortunately think there's going to be a big issue with transportation within the next 10, 20 years. So obviously it can't be traveling all over the place. California right now is lucky enough to have a huge amount of agriculture that's already happening statewide, but I also think that might change. We're already seeing that shift. We're already seeing all these farmers have issues, and us as hydroponic farmers are just sort of waiting for them to come and ask us, to help them change. Whether it's with hydroponics and vertical farming, or I kind of like to think about sort of creative irrigation. We talk a lot about indoor agriculture, but there's ways of adapting hydroponic methods just to make it more efficient when you're growing in soil. And so it's tough. I mean, LA is just a big conversation, and unfortunately, I mean, the first part of it is just that the population is the main issue there.
So what about smallhold? Is there a response there in that context?
Yeah, I mean, smallhold. I'm interested in two different things, to be honest. I'm interested in.
Imagine that.
No, I'm interested in helping the world, and I want everyone to be able to eat good local food. But then I'm also really interested in nice entrepreneurship. I think that throughout the last 30 years, there's been just brutal ways of starting businesses, and it's seriously damaged our economy and in the country and definitely around the world. And I find it so interesting that people can make money off of food. And so whether I think that it works environmentally in certain areas, I'm not quite sure if it would work in LA. I wouldn't say don't start this kind of stuff, but I don't know if it would necessarily apply as far as the future of food in Los Angeles. Right now, I think it would work. The point of smallhold is allowing for local people to grow food, but also to take advantage of the local market. There's nothing to you can't deny that local produce you can charge more money for it, and it's worth it. Eventually it would be nice if people just ate that stuff anyway. But right now, that's how these people can sort of create those businesses, which is what I find interesting.
Okay, great, thank you. So now we've covered 4 cities and at least a taste of a vision of the future there. We got an audience question here. Question is, what do you guys think of aerofarms and aeroponic farming techniques? They use virtually no water. Okay, so I guess the first question would be what we think of aeroponic farming techniques. Existed before. The company AeroFarms is now initiating that, planning to launch the largest vertical farm in the world in Newark, New Jersey, just in our backyard. And a great group that recently sponsored NYC Agritecture and was actually here in Germany with us for the Association of Vertical Farming annual meeting. So aeroponics, yeah, I absolutely think it's incredible the fact how much water it saves. I think the potential to use less substrate, the material that holds the plants, is a big benefit. We've seen positive results on increasing growth. My only concern is that it's a bit on the high tech end. Andrew and we've been in greenhouses that have lost power, and you lose all the product. And I think unless you have a really secure power source, there's no water left over for the plants to kind of remain in. And Max knows aeroponics better than I do, but that's kind of my opinion on it. And aerofarms, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, no, I've only positive things to say about aerofarms, and I wish them the best for their opening next year once they start selling their produce in New York. But one difficulty that we've experienced with aeroponics is always that the shelf life of the product is reduced if you grow it with aeroponic technologies. So that's going to be an issue with leafy greens, in my opinion. I think it's an amazing technology and probably the most advanced watering technique there is at the moment. But for other purposes, I don't think it's there yet to produce food. At least not yet. At least not if you want to store it. If you eat it fresh right away, then it's probably the best way to do it.
Got to have a plant cube for that.
Exactly.
Florenzi, any opinion on aeroponics?
Well, we didn't, it was something we didn't explore much, but I think that eventually, it's the best of all techniques in terms of how, we save water with it. But I really am not. I'm not an expert. Max was saying the shelf life of the produce is not long. I have no experience with that, really.
Okay, no problem.
I think what's really great about aerofarms, despite the unknowns, is that they're pushing the technology. I mean, they're putting lots of money into it, and whether it works or not, people are going to see what happens. I mean, I have faith that it's going to work. I think a lot of us do have faith that it's going to work, but this is what needs to happen with vertical farming. Conceptually it makes a lot of sense, but it's not necessarily applied enough. As soon as it starts being applied, and then people start seeing that it's profitable, then that's when the technology really gets to where it needs to be.
Henry, there was a Singapore farm, right, that was working almost completely on aeroponics.
I don't know of the Singapore one. The ones in Singapore I know are definitely sky greens. They use as kind of a soil-based method, and they're experimenting with a hydroponic one in towers. And then there was an aquaponic one. What's that rooftop one in Singapore? Comcrop, I think it is. They do rooftop hydroponics, aquaponics. But we'll look into that, and we can answer the question afterwards too. We're wrapping up here kind of near the end, so thanks for that question, John. About aeroponics, and certainly keep up your search and exploration of that. It'll be exciting to see what AeroFarms does. Now on to this next and final question. It's a perfect one. How hopeful are you for the future of food? It's easy to get depressed. We watched a great Balbo Jr.'s work yesterday, which I imagine is about the end of the world as we know it, and how food will drive that. But anyway, how do you stay positive in a world with increasing climate insecurity? It's unsure for us, and there's so many different people getting involved in this space. How do we stay optimistic? Maybe some of us don't. For me, it's more fun. I think it's just more fun to envision a world where there is, a chance, a hope, and it's not trying to be blind optimism. It's being driven by what I believe everyone should have as a perspective for their life. You have the power to be optimistic and to imagine how your life is, and if you imagine a better life, it's really likely you're going to have that. I've experienced that through numerous challenges. So I think it's a balance of the practicing that vision that spurs optimism, and also just we have to give it a try, right? We know we can do better. There has to be a way we can do better, and we're responsible to do that. So don't get depressed. Just get to work.
Yeah, that's kind of my opinion about it. Is it's easy to get sad about it. If you're sad and you don't do anything about it, then there's no one else to blame except yourself. And so I feel like you just have to go for it, and I find that actually optimistic in a weird way. I think that working on it, figuring it out, is so exciting, and that's what makes me happy about it.
And then how can I not be optimistic? In Italy, you're always optimistic about food, right?
Yeah, it makes you happy.
Yeah.
What do you think?
We believe in food in Italy, so we strongly believe in food. So yes, we are optimistic about the future of food.
No, I definitely share the optimism and the enthusiasm. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't sit here. I absolutely have a very, very optimistic view on the future. And I think we ourselves are the ones that can make the change and can have the impact on how the future will look like. And since all of us here in this Google Hangout are driving that change, I mean, there's absolutely no reason to be depressed or to not have a positive outlook on the future. I think, yeah, be the change that you want to see in the world and make your own part of the difference.
Great. I really want to thank all of our participants tonight as we wrap up. We had Florenzia Costa joining us from Italy. You should definitely Google Florenzia Costa and clepsydra to learn about her vertical farming concepts. Maybe it's right for the city near you. We also want to thank Max Loso of Agrilution.
Thank you.
You can find them online. You also can find them on Twitter at Agrilution. And they have some really great content on the future of food, what they're doing, and what other innovators are doing in the space. I want to thank Andrew Carter from Smallhold. You can find pictures of his journey as he launches his shipping container in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, on Instagram at smallholds.bk. My name is Henry Gordon Smith. I am the founder of agritecture.com. Please follow, please share. We need more people on board, and we have a lot fresher ideas. Thanks for your time, and keep up the great disrupting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you to all of you guys. That was a really interesting and really fascinating session. Thanks to our audience for those questions too. That is the end of this session, and we are pretty much at the end of the diff now. We've got just one more day, though there is a 30-day catch-up period after the live events. I just wanted to point you in the direction of just a couple of events that are going on tomorrow. We've got a session with Dr. Paul Clark at 10 o'clock, reflecting on a lot of the agricultural sessions that we've, 10 o'clock GMT I should say, reflecting on a lot of the agricultural sessions that we've had during the diff, not specifically looking at vertical farming and urban farming, but certainly I think that would be a factor in some of the conversations, and definitely for those of you who attended this session, could be an interesting place to stop in. And then at 12 o'clock GMT, we've got a session on a vision for Europe, looking at mobility, built environment and food systems, and the possibilities around there. So do tune in for those sessions. Thank you again to our panel, it was terrific, and thank you so much for attending.